That joke isn't funny anymore. Available on Amazon and everywhere. Hey guys, welcome back to the Lou Perez podcast. I'm your host, Lou Perez, and today I am joined by Jon Miltimore, which I hope I said it correctly, Jon.
You actually got it. Most people mangle my name, but that was perfect.
Okay, cool. This is really cool because I've been following and reading Jon's work for a few years now, and I realized that the first time that I started seeing Jon's stuff was with FEE, Foundation for Economic Education, and Jon was always like, putting out these really great explainers that were both you were able to kind of take a white paper and make it interesting, and sometimes point out stuff in popular culture and all that. And I thought that was great, especially for the audience for FEE, which tended to be younger people. And now you got stuff you're writing with AIER, and of course you have your Substack called The Take, which I follow. And so I appreciate all your work, and thanks for taking time on a cold winter's morn to chat with me.
The pleasure's mine, Lou. I've been watching, your stuff for years. I wish I was as funny as you. I do like writing about the pop culture stuff, so it's fun seeing that those pieces, resonated. I don't know how cold. Where are you out of?
So I'm in New Jersey. So this morning it got, I think at one point it was around 3 degrees Fahrenheit, because that's what we do here. We do Fahrenheit, and now it's up to I think 8 degrees. So.
Okay, I'm in Minnesota, so we're about 10 degrees colder. Like it was -7 last time.
I'm ashamed for even bringing up temperature with a man in Minnesota. So
it's the first thing you go to the grocery store. People are like, how about this weather? And they say, well, we're in Minnesota. It's January. What do you expect?
Yeah. Well, there's something about the weather where it gives everybody something to talk about, and sort of like everybody a chance to talk about the same exact thing. It's like weather, natural disasters. It's like, it could really bring people together.
It did, and then we got climate change in there. So now you can't even talk about the weather without pissing someone off, right? Like,
yeah.
We better start doing something about those CO2 emissions. It's the weather's supposed to be something we can talk about and just kind of shoot the breeze, and usually people do. It's not. I've rarely encountered that where you're talking about the weather and somebody tries to wedge in climate change.
Well, with you, I mean, with you in Minnesota, it's probably like, we need more of it. We need more climate change. Like, let's go. I want fucking palm trees and
give us some global warming. It's too damn cold over here.
Yeah. What are you from? Minnesota originally?
From Wisconsin originally.
Wisconsin. Okay.
So it's just a short, jaunt over. I spent the first, 22 years or so, 23 years in Wisconsin, then bebopped around all over the place. And when me and my wife got married, we decided to go to the Twin Cities area, where we've been here for about 15, 16 years now. And it's nice, it's Minnesota nice. You hear that? I was a long time, I didn't realize Minnesota nice was kind of a joke, because it's like passive aggressive nice. People in Minnesota are very kind of standoffish at first, very good people, but it's not like, New Jersey, I know some guys from New Jersey and from Philly, very different culture. They come off like the tough guy, like, they might be a teddy bear underneath, but when you first meet them, they're going to be like, all tough. Minnesota's the opposite. They're all very warm and sweet outside, but probably won't let you into the inner circle for about 3 or 4 years. But
yeah, I brought this up on another podcast where, oftentimes you have like the Brooklyn, Jersey, like playing it tough, but it's like, no, you fuck with a farm boy from Minnesota or a wrestler, like you're done, man. You're finished. They could be very quiet. Were you a wrestler? Yeah.
Yeah. I was a 3-sport guy, but wrestling was by far my best sport. And I wrestled in college, and it's one of those, my Philly buddy, he always said, like, he talks stuff. He never wrestled me. He knew better, and he's but really good guy. But you're right, and there's that old adage about boxers and wrestlers, and wrestlers tend to win those. Although now you got MMA, and they're great at both. Yeah. And like, to be a good MMA fighter, you have to be a good wrestler and good boxer, and they get very good at both.
Well, the fact that you wrestled in college, I think that says a lot, and especially wrestling in that part of the country. Did you where'd you go to college?
I did my undergrad at UW-Platteville, and it's one of those schools. A lot of people, just west of Madison. my grades weren't good enough for Madison. I wasn't a good enough wrestler for Madison, but Platteville did. They reached out, and at the time I wasn't even sure I'd go to college. And I'm like, wow, they want me to. I felt really good. They reached out to me, and I had some great coaches there. I did it. You know, the guys that were coaching me, especially early on, Big Ten All-American guys. And to me that was always like, you dream of these. Like, these were kids I watched growing up, and they were just great coaches that wrestled for UW. One was a 4-time All-American, one was a 3-time All-American, and wrestling those guys every day was really cool for me.
Did you wrestle freestyle or Greco?
I did. Well, I mean, we did a lot of freestyle and Greco going up. Like, once you get to high school, college, it's all folk style, like kind of traditional.
But yeah. What's the what is the difference between?
So Greco is all upper body. It's all throwing.
Right.
You can't grab legs, right? Like, it's all throws. My son's wrestling. Like, we're just getting into Greco and freestyle now, and it completes your wrestling all these different ways. Freestyle is just my favorite kind of wrestling, because it's all about turning people. It just opens up style, and basically you can get points just for quick tips and stuff. Folk style is like it's the traditional wrestling, grinded out. It's what I guess in the Olympics they have both freestyle and Greco. I think they might have it all at the Olympics now. Although maybe not folk style. I can't remember. Yeah. But just different ways to score. But you should do it. Any good wrestler should be able to do it all. That's kind of like, that's what's gonna. All of them are gonna make you better. Yeah.
Training like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's awesome because I didn't grow up with any wrestling whatsoever. So any time where I was actually like able, like whether like in training to get like a legit takedown, like a legit throw, I felt like a friggin' I don't know, like a superhero, like an action star, being able to to throw another human being from standing.
Jiu-jitsu seems to be like kind of the trend now. I talk to more wrestling dads and stuff. We go to a lot of tournaments, and we're part of the wrestling club here. And I talk to these dads. They're like, I'm getting back into jiu-jitsu. I'm like, oh, really?
I think
more power to them.
Dude, I think you'd love it. There's Eddie Bravo. He's the owner of 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu, and Eddie. But most people probably know Eddie from. He's a good, best friends with Joe Rogan, and he's been on Joe Rogan like from the start. And he started out wrestling like middle school or high school, and basically I think his sales pitch to wrestlers is like, you got the guy down, you got him in all these different positions. Don't you want to get that choke? Don't you want to take that arm? Don't you want to take that leg? So I think there is something like really satisfying about that. And then I mean, you're going into jiu-jitsu with a grappling base is just just gives you, it puts you like so much far ahead from a lot of people. Like there are people like you'll watch like some of these tournaments, and there's like there are a bunch of white belts going, but it's like you have the one white belt who's a dad who's been training a couple times a week for a year, and he's going against a white belt who's a guy who wrestled in college. And it's just so evident, just the differences there.
It's funny that we even started talking about this, that it just kind of came up. But yeah, we were at a tournament. I think it was Sunday, and for the second time, I had an angry mother get in my face.
Whoa!
And my 8-year-old was wrestling, and he does, he's pretty green. He's not getting a lot of wins. Ekes out a victory, and in the first match of the day, last second score. And I was so happy. The third match, the mom kind of sidles up to me while he's wrestling and starts getting in my ear saying I shouldn't be talking when the kids are wrestling, and everyone, it's a wrestling tournament, everyone's coaching. And I did tell the referee, I'm like, hey, they're clasping, you can't do clasping. And I think that angered her, and she starts just getting on my ear. And I realized, oh, the moms, I've been to 1,000 wrestling tournaments, and the dads are never an issue, but you get some of the moms get very intense, and I get it. They're protective of their children, and they'll just try to pick a fight, and it's sort of sometimes I wasn't real great. I didn't handle that situation with a lot of grace because my kid was wrestling. Right. But these it made me think I'm going to write a book someday. added to my 10 books on my list, but like memoirs of a wrestling dad, because these tournaments, they're so fun, but they're crazy. Like all these different people, they're so intense, but wrestling is that culture. There's just something about the culture of wrestling. I started when I was 4 years old, and it's a big part of my life. And someday I do want to just kind of, it'll be kind of a Lou Perez, but it'll be funny. It's not going to be a serious book, but just kind of, just reflecting on the culture of wrestling, which is very unique.
Well, with the culture of wrestling, you're already starting at a base where you're in a room. And often it's like a gymnasium. It's like it's very funny, like how low key wrestling is. Like even like trials and stuff like that. Like it could basically be done anywhere. You could just put down a pad, but you're in an atmosphere where the default setting is tough as nails. So like. You're looking around. I don't know if you have the cauliflower ear, but I'm sure you look around and you're like, there's a ton of dads and they all got that fucking cauliflower ear. And it's like, okay, it's like everybody, there's an understanding there of like, if you mouth off to another guy, well, this isn't just like any, dad, this is a dad who, who knows how to handle himself. So there's sort of like a self-policing, I bet, that happens there. And then you throw the moms in, which kind of, just throw things out of whack,
No, that my wife said, wow, you got to be ballsy to really get in someone's face at a wrestling tournament, right? Because everyone knows, like, there's a lot of backgrounds. My cauliflower ear isn't bad. Like, you can feel it and you can see it a little bit, but it's mostly inside. My brother-in-law, he wrestled for lacrosse, and which was one of our rivals. And he's a few years older, and he's got the ears that are down to nothing, right? But that's the thing of pride within that, like whether it's jiu-jitsu or wrestling, people look at it with pride when you have those, and it's kind of like a signal, like, yeah, maybe you don't want to mess with this guy.
Yeah. Out of all the guys you were like, go to, my wife was, when we were dating, she was kind of clear. She's like, I don't like that. She's like, I don't want you to have that. So I'm the guy, I have my earmuffs on, to protect myself. I want to talk about something, about, the mom kind of like getting in your face and stuff. And it's something that I see so much. I used to see it out in the real world, like when I would go to like, bars and stuff like that. But now I see it so much online of girlfriends and wives starting fights with other men while their husbands or boyfriends are there. And it's never a good idea. It's like, for one, it's not a good idea to be with somebody who starts fights to begin with. Agreed. It's a really bad idea to be with somebody who starts fights that they don't have to fight. And
it's funny because I really think that was the whole thing. I think she kind of wanted to pick a fight. And then, during they're doing the awards, the kids are getting their medals and stuff. And then, of course, like the husband, of course, starts talking. I think it was all orchestrated. Some people are drawn to that conflict. And, these are things like, I wish I could say, like, I just ignored it. I couldn't. I kind of had to, I got a little peacock myself. And then I just suggested, hey, let's take this outside. We'll talk. We don't need to be doing this in front of the kids. And I kind of made my way to the exit and encouraged him to follow me, and he didn't. And that was enough for me. But then I look back on that and I wasn't proud. And I'm like, how do I avoid a situation like that? And I see, some people like within our club are really, really good at this. These are intense situations. The first thing is you don't engage other parents. But a lot of time you're just talking to each other. It's friendly. She engaged me in a very, in a way that I felt, but I should have just walked away. Never, because it did come up, like, how dare, because I did not respond very nicely when she was like chirping in my ear when my son was wrestling. And instead of just walking away, I snapped at her, I was already a little, my energy's going, and she gave me the, how dare you talk to a woman that way type thing. And I'm like, it's natural. You get in someone's face. I wish I could just move over here and keep going. But those are things in life, chalk it down. These are situations. Just don't put yourself in situations like that. And fortunately, you had adults. We weren't drunk at bars. I think you're right. You do see people, they feed on drama. They want drama. And then you throw in alcohol, you get, people are throwing fisticuffs and all that. It's not good.
Yeah. Yeah. The I saw a video, and it was a video that I had actually wanted to make for a while, where it's basically a self-defense video where it's instructing the woman in the situation to not be in to not stand between the aggressor and the boyfriend. You are not helping whatsoever. And you're definitely not helping if you're trying to break it up by grabbing your boyfriend, like grabbing his arms and stuff and holding him back and stuff like that, because you're putting him at an insane disadvantage. And it was a really good, explainer. It's sort of like, you need to move out of the way because you're taking your boyfriend's attention away from the possible, aggressor. And, you putting your hands, holding him back isn't going to help. And I had a situation like that years and years ago with my girlfriend in New York City. We took a cab, and it was during a strike. So it was like a taxi strike. So this guy was, kind of I guess a scab, but we didn't care, whatever. And we take the cab, and he doesn't have like the meter. He has the meter running. He stops the meter, and then he tells me how much I need to tip him, which which pissed me off. And I think I had a few drinks in me, and we get out of the cab, like all three of us, and there's my girlfriend, who's like 5'3", trying to be like in the middle of me and this guy, a bigger dude. And afterwards I had to explain to her just how dangerous that was, never do that. That was our first fight. That was actually not a first literal fight, because we ended up, I didn't have to fight the taxi driver, thankfully, but it was our first argument where I had to explain to her, never do that again. Never.
Yeah. It's funny. I've known my wife now for almost 25 years, and she was there for some of my college days when I'd get a little out of hand, and this isn't something I was ever proud of, but my 20s, I did some dumb stuff. And I wasn't one to ever shy away from a confrontation. And I'll tell my kids, don't handle things like that. And that whole chapter in my life, long gone. But I always, like, my wife knows, she always knew, just like, don't get in the way of things. Like if he wants to do something, go let him. And I think there is something like that. That's prudent. You want your girlfriend or wife, just to kind of not be in the way, because you're right, it would only inflame the situation.
Yeah, my wife, to her credit, there are times where there have been, had words with somebody on the street, and I turn around and she's long gone, like she's out. She booked it.
That's
and
smart.
It's like
that's how my wife reacts.
it.
She's like, 100%. If you want to, puff your chest out and get all like that, that's fine. But she knows I'm being an idiot, and and she's not going to try to. And to me, that's smart. That's a sign of a good woman. Now, if it was ever a real situation, I know she'd have my back in I don't mean in a physical encounter, but in something important. Like she's,
right.
That's something every man should welcome a wife who would go in the trenches with him in metaphorically speaking, like they're not going to be fighting your battle. But, if you have that, thank God at night if you have that in your partner, because the older I get, like, life is hard. And if you don't have a rock next to you, I imagine it'd be really tough.
Yeah. Well, and also in your case, just to let everybody know, if it wasn't for your wife, this wouldn't be happening right now, because she fixed the tech.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's fun. We both work from home. Her office is right next to me. My office is right here. And I have a help desk and an accountant and everything else, because she's very organized, very good. Some of the things I'm not as good at, she can just get on it. And it's I think it's Ben Franklin, whether it's apocryphal or not, said behind every good man is a better woman. In my case, it's true.
Nice. Well, God bless you on that one. And speaking of good men, good women, good people, one of the latest things that you wrote that really resonated with me. I think it was like a reshare. You reshared an experience you had at Starbucks with, kind of shitty customer service would be a way to describe it, and how kind of things have been going down a lot, I think, when it comes to customer service in general and manners in general. I want to talk to you about that, because when I read that, I'm like, I have a fellow old man who we've been in the same situation many times.
It's funny that piece has resonated, and it just gets shared everywhere, and the comments like explode on it. And it goes back to about 13 months ago. I was at a Starbucks with my daughter. My daughter, she's 13 now. At the time, she was 12, and she, like every 13-year-old girl, loves Starbucks. And she's always like, Dad, can we do one? So once a week, I try to like do a little father-daughter time. Probably more, once a week is probably ambitious. We don't get there quite that much, but it's our time to get out. And so this day I go up and I order her a foo-foo lemonade. I forget what was in it, and like a Gouda sandwich and just a black coffee for myself. And the server, the barista, looks at me. She's like, "Our coffee machine's broken," and that was it. And she kind of didn't look, didn't say like, "Gosh, I'm sorry," and it didn't help probably in my mind because I'm kind of a curmudgeon. She has, I think, a nose ring and pink hair, and I felt like, just like, aren't you going to try to help the situation at all? And,
right.
and she just wasn't going to. So I'm like, fine, I'll just do the Gouda sandwich then and the lemonade. She kind of doesn't say a word, just goes and gets it for me and barks our order. And for me, I was a bartender, I was a server. And these were jobs I had in college, and I think I was a pretty good one. And I remember being terrified when I first was a waiter. Like, I'm not saying it's an easy job; it's not one of the hardest jobs I've ever had. But I took a certain pride in it. Like, you wanted to please your customer, and one of the first things they teach you is you never say no, right? You always offer. It's like, gosh, well, we don't have that. We're all out of the ribeye, but you offer an alternative, and that always stood out to me. And, just writing about that experience, I had on Twitter like hundreds of comments, and people are like, well, she didn't offer you a pour over. She, like, why didn't she? And what's really interesting, about a year later, I was writing about Starbucks again. And it was the National Labor Relations Board had sued Starbucks because they fired some really surly bad workers. And they said, this was back it goes back to 2020, but I kind of connected these two things. And I'm like, wow, maybe this isn't all Starbucks' fault. They're getting all this pressure where they're told it's illegal to fire workers, even when they're behaving badly. And these workers were behaving badly. They were slamming drinks down. They've been written up for being late, for leaving the register. And we find out during these court proceedings, they're actually secretly recording their bosses. Okay. Dozens of recordings, because and the reason it was illegal, though, they were trying to form a union. And I thought about this, and I'm like, why should people be protected from bad behavior? Like to me, we don't need a federal bureaucracy in here saying, sorry, you can't fire these workers, even though they're doing bad stuff because they're trying to form a union. To me, that's crazy. And I would expect to be fired in my job if I was, being rude to customers. And so I think part of it, you have that cultural component. Like during the pandemic, I think service got much worse, and there was a lot of chaos. But then you also have the bureaucratic component where, even when some of these places might want to fire bad workers, they might not be able to because of things we're not seeing, like union organizations and so forth. Where, again, Starbucks was ordered to rehire. The lawsuit was 3-4 years. They were ordered to rehire these workers and give them back pay. Maybe there's an appeal coming up. I don't know. But for whatever reason, you saw that article. I think a lot of people see how bad service has become and how bad manner, there's just a lot of bad manners. These are invisible parts of society that, we don't need laws to make people better all the time. Sometimes it's just the things we do without being told, without being ordered.
Yeah. I have my dad has a butcher shop, so I would work the register there every now and then, and to me it was just obvious. You look a customer in the eye, you say hello, how's it going, how can I help you? When your time with them is over, you say thank you, maybe say come again, or hope to see you again, have a great day. And even like little things, little bits like that are missing. Like the other day I went to the mall with my kids, and there was a little candy shop, and we put my littlest one loves Swedish fish. So I know, got a bunch of those. It put it in a bag, brought it to the register. The girl said, "Do you need a bag?" And I said, "No, it's okay. We'll use that bag." And then rang me up. I did my credit card, and then there were no other words. Like, I didn't know if it went through. I don't know if there was another step that we needed to make. And I had to ask her, "Oh, are we good? Are we done?" Okay. And she's like, "Yeah, okay." And then we were gone. It's like these little thing. I don't know. It's like little glitches in the matrix. An awkward. My wife and I had an awkward time. There's a really great dumpling place in New Jersey. Since it's going to be an awkward story, I don't want to say their name because I don't want them to, but one of the dishes they had crab in it. And I asked the waiter, young kid, I was like, "Is this real crab or is it imitation crab?" And he said, "Oh, I don't know." And just froze. And we just waited. And I'm like, "Well, can you find out?" Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, let me know. And then he went and asked the kitchen and then came back. And then I had to ask him again, is it real crab? I was like, "Oh no, it's imitation crab." I'm like, "Oh, okay, thank you."
It is funny how you see it in all these different places. And like, we were at Target yesterday, and my littlest son wanted a new PS5 remote. His is all kind of, it's on the fritz. So I told him I'd split it with him. We'd go halvesies because he's got his own money. I'm like, I like to encourage, like, have some skin in the game. He's like, "Okay." So we're gonna get it. I'm at Target for 20 minutes and there's nobody in the electronic. Now, I could have pulled one off the shelf that was just there, but everything else was behind the case of if you wanted one that was a certain color. And he wanted a blue one. I'm like, you know what? He's 8. I'll give him a blue one. He wants a blue one. But nobody's showing up. So finally, I got to go. I'm looking for anyone in a red shirt. And I finally get someone and say, "Hey, can you have?" And she was polite. She's like, "Well, that's not my department, but I'll call someone over to you." But I was just surprised it took. And I wasn't the only customer. It's funny because there was a different customer next to me. I realized she was waiting for someone too. And it's a small thing. I don't want to make a bigger deal out of that, but it shows that we expect more from our businesses. And that to me is a big difference here between bureaucracy and business. In business, we kind of expect, people are polite. They want to help us. And that to me is a functioning business and a product of a capitalist society, right? Like, we're there, to treat the customer well, and we know how that relationship works. Like we got to make the customer happy, and he's going to pay us. Bureaucracy is the opposite, right? Like, we have to stand in the line at the DMV for 30 minutes, sometimes 90 minutes, whatever. And I've had nice people at the DMV, but let's face it, the DMV is not known for being like a very cheerful place. But it's the system, right? This bureaucratic system where the power structure is inverted, the natural power structure where in business, you're there to serve your customer and make sure he's happy. In bureaucracy, it doesn't work that way. And that's why I think, bureaucracy isn't just, a grumpier place, but it also functions less well because all those natural incentives that we take place that occur in a market economy, they're not there in a bureaucracy, and you end up with long lines, bad service, and a lot of other problems.
Yeah, and I wish it was something that I could say I only see at like chains, that I only see it like that you would only experience that at a Target or at a Starbucks, where it is a big organization, and there's thousands of them all over the place, but it's something that I even find at like small mom and pop stores, and restaurants. So, it's kind of become kind of like a crapshoot on going to a new place, especially like I live in a small town, and anytime like a new place opens up, we're praying for it to be amazing. Cause it's like, I want to come, to your establishment. I want this to be my new place where I come. And unfortunately, we have a couple of places. Like, we have a great coffee shop and stuff, and the workers there are fantastic. But it is funny where it's sort of like this kind of blasé way of going about things and not really doing your job, it has trickled down into even like small businesses. And it's like, man, it is so difficult, to keep a business afloat in the first place. So if you're not like kind of going one step beyond to try to retain customers, it's like you're going to go under. It's going to suck.
You said something earlier I think is important. Like you said, the little stuff about looking someone in the eye and doing these are things. I coach fourth grade, fifth grade football the last couple of years, and I love that our organization. Is it about football? Yeah, like we're teaching fundamentals about football, but they really, as an organization, emphasize a lot of the things we're talking about. How you look someone in the eye, how you shake their hand, and look them in the eye, and how you thank after every practice, say, go shower, go thank your parents for taking you, and sort of that measure of gratitude, of service. Like you have all these people that are helping in organizations, and the parents doing the work. We want kids to kind of be mindful of that, and it's actually trickled down. I have 3 kids. My middle son's 11, and after every wrestling tournament, he says to me, he's like, "Dad, thank you for coaching me." I've never asked him to say that. I think it's part of the culture that we had in football and things like where you thank people for that, and those are lessons. Those are just important lessons we need to give the next generation. Like, it sounds very Pollyannish to talk about that and to care about that. I think it is so important that we teach those, young people those little simple messages. To things like gratitude, and just good manners, and respecting people and looking them in the eye. All of that stuff really matters, and it's going to make these kids better workers. These things are important to society in ways we don't realize, which is why I remember the article you talked about. I quote Cormac McCarthy in there, and I'm a big Cormac McCarthy fan. I got
he just passed away.
He did, yeah. And there was that quote in No Country for Old Men. He said, "Once the sir and ma'am go away, the end is pretty much in sight." And that's the line from Tommy Lee Jones in the movie, who played that character. And is it hyperbole? Yeah, probably. But I think the message is spot on. Like the manners of a culture matter. Like it's all this stuff, just treating people well, treating your neighbor well, just because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and with your with your piece, there are a number of people commenting saying, "Hey, I'm with you, man, 100%. I've noticed this. It bothers me. It makes me not want to go out sometimes because it's like it's just a headache of experience." But then you have the other people who are like defending, that it's like, well, how do you expect them to work and to put a smile on when they're only making, minimum wage, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like the excuses that people will make for anything are, I mean, at this point, I mean, it should be expected. But I remember there was something that went kind of semi-viral on X a while back. It was in regards to saying please and thank you. It's like there were actually people arguing about raising your children to say please and thank you. It was just like these little stones will have will reverberate and have these ripple effects across society at large.
It's funny, I hear this and I think back to like ancient Greece. And Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, who are taking issue with the sophists, right? The sophists will argue any point out there, like they're just going to argue with you. And partly though, they reject the whole idea of virtue and goodness anyway. Like they're basically nihilists and say, all this stuff is relative, and they're just going to argue for the sake of arguing. And Socrates was like, no, this isn't the way. And what happens to Socrates? He's put to death.
Well, it would be something if the barista serving him the hemlock was just like, rolling her eyes as giving it to it. Speaking of Socrates and philosophy and how to live life. I once heard philosophy was described as a preparation for death. Now, I'm not necessarily sure if maybe that's one part of philosophy. But one of the pieces that you shared was from a historian, someone I'd never heard of before. Is it Jacques Barzun?
Jacques Barzun, wonderful historian.
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about Jacques and
Sure.
some of the things there?
He was a longtime professor. I forget if it was Texas Tech or University of Texas. It was one of those Texas universities. He lived to be 100 years old, 101 maybe. I was introduced to Barzun by my father, and Barzun wrote this best-selling book when I was probably 15 years old called From Dawn to Decadence. In that book traces, really what I think Barzun was saying from the dawn of high civilization, this period of Renaissance and high culture, to what he saw us going. He saw us on a sharp decline. And he was writing about these things, this decline before, I think most major scholars were paying attention, or everybody else saw culture and society going higher because technology kept getting better. Barzun sees something else going on. He's seen a moral decline in people, and he writes about it in that book. And I've written several articles just pulling stuff from Dawn to Decadence and some stuff from YouTube videos. One thing that always stood out to me is he saw this sort of decentralization happening way back in like 2000. And he said, we see all this power, consolidating. He said, like people said, oh, the EU is now, this bigger organization. And he said, if you look closely, what you're seeing is a breakdown, a decentralization happening. But he was saying that's a good thing. And that always stood out to me. And when Brexit happened, I remember highlighting what, his thesis that what we're seeing is a natural breakup, and all of this trying to force all these countries together, like Yugoslavia, all these other things. If you look at the 20th century, you had sort of the central planners trying to just force countries together. And what Barzun was saying is that whole paradigm is breaking up. That's not working. And I look back at our own country, our own founding, and I look today and I see America, and I'm like, America was never supposed to be this. Like we're an empire in the traditional sense. We're this, we have, our 50 states, but we're spread all over the globe. We kind of inherited the British Empire, right? Like Britain no longer had the strength to do it. France, they were collapsing. So America kind of filled that vacuum. And I see it now. I'm like, America was designed to be a republic, not an empire. And I look at America today and the chaos of the politics. This is where I got to tread carefully, because I don't want to. These are just my own. I think efforts to kind of keep this together through Washington, through power, is going to be very messy. And I'm not talking about the next 4 years. I'm not talking the next 10 years. I'm talking about the next 50 years. I think what we'd see is America, you have all these different cultures. And, John Locke wrote about the right to revolt. And if there's people that say, well, this system here isn't really working, I don't think we should be part of that. And if they want to have like their own independence movement, I don't think that should be suppressed through force. I think the American founding, said, no, these are rights that we have, including the right to declare our independence from Britain. And, there's people that really just that suggestion, they get their back up a lot. And because we love our country. But I think if you go back to the first principles, the principles of America would say, no, when this thing starts to not work, when we're $36 trillion in debt, when that turns into $80 trillion in debt, maybe trying to keep all of this together through the force of Washington, D.C., maybe that's not the best interest for people.
Yeah. I was on my friend Kira Davis. She was guest hosting a radio show a little while back. And it was, during the campaign, and there was, a lot of the, was obviously a lot of the rhetoric, calling Donald Trump a Nazi, and basically, 80 million people Nazis or Nazi sympathizers. And it was at the time where sort of like the Democrats were kind of speaking out of both sides of their mouths, where it was like calling them a Nazi, but also needing to save the country and all that. And, when I was hearing that, I was like, I don't want to share a country with 80 million Nazis. What a great argument for national divorce. As I don't know if Michael Malice came up with it, But he's definitely been speaking about it for a while, and it says a lot when a term like national divorce starts to be discussed in the in the open, freely. But it really is this idea. It's like you have Americans who despise the quote unquote other side of America, and yet they still want to share a country with them. Or is it the idea that just given enough time they'll be able to bring all the Nazis to heel? So
this
yeah,
whole national divorce conversation is one I've watched in recent years, and I almost never talk about it publicly because it is a very thorny topic, and people feel really passionately about it, and they'll accuse you of being anti-American and so forth. And I'm not advocating it. I like part of me, I studied a lot of history. I read a lot of history. I kind of have realized like we're kind of along for the ride. My ability to shape history is somewhat minimal. But I hope we can fix these problems, and I think it's possible we can. When you look at the massive debt, when you look at the administrative state, which is really out of control, maybe a president can fix those things, and maybe a Congress can kind of go back and bring constitutional law back and bring some of that originalism. But I think that's going to be a big challenge, and if we do reach a point where you have California that wanted to go its own way, or Texas wanted to go its own way, and we're going to use power to say, no, you can't do that. Even if there's to me, that's very anti-American, and it's against those first principles of Locke and others. And like I said, I hope we can fix these problems without going down that road. But yeah, Malice is one of those. I think he's talked about this for a lot of years, and it's not just people. Like you see. I remember Sarah Silverman talking about it on one of her shows, and people have different ideas on fundamentally different ideas about morality and values. And I don't want to force everyone to live by my values, and I hope that they're not going to force me to live by their values too much. But the Constitution is at a kind of a breaking point. These pardons are a great example, right? We're seeing now an abuse of presidential power. Like, I don't think anyone denies it's an abuse. The people that defend it are just saying, well, it's an abuse, but we're doing it because Trump, and that's how it's being framed. Because all those people were, 4 years ago were just the idea that Trump was flirting with this idea that he was going to pardon people. Everybody understood what kind of precedent that would be, how wrong that would be. But Biden on his way out just started issuing it was a massive pardon party. And so basically what is that? It gives any president the power to behave corruptly, and then, say on his way out, if he loses, say, well, gosh, like we better issue all these pardons to people so they don't get in trouble for doing these things.
And they have, well, which is so wild is like they're pardoning people who haven't even been charged with anything, and
pardons dating back 10 years, right?
Yeah.
It's so wild. And
I wish there was an equivalent of that for me and all my fuck ups 10 years ago, where it's like, wipe the slate clean, Lou.
Although it did occur to me, like, this is something you can, ask these people to testify, and if they perjure themselves in 2025, well, guess what? That's that I don't think a pardon would legally hold. So wow. I do hope that we can bring people before Congress and get answers to some of these things, because I do think there was a lot of malfeasance and things that were criminal, and maybe we can't charge them for that conduct during that time, and maybe we wouldn't even want to, but we do deserve the truth. We do deserve to know what NIH was funding in Wuhan and how that was being funded, and why you were telling people that were talking about this in 2020 and 2021 that we're going to not allow you to speak publicly, and we're going to organize, Facebook's going to ban you and things like these. These were very serious things they were doing. We deserve answers, even if we're not going to put people behind bars for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or we deserve answers if there's a possibility that the answers and the truth, there isn't a conspiracy. Let's just get it out in the open. There could be a chance that I would think that you and I are wrong, and that there wasn't, all the stuff that we're attested to. Let's get it out there. Let's hear it.
Amen. Get the documents out. Let them speak. Let's do, the hearings. This extends to, like, if you remember, like we had the church committee hearings in the 70s, right? There was enough senators of both parties that looked and said, wow, CIA is kind of out of control here, right? Like, there's some things like these intelligence agencies are not, the checks and balances are not there. So what we're going to do is have these very public hearings, and the church committee hearings gave us all kinds of information that we saw that there wasn't accountability. And I think it did help rein in some of the problems. I think we're in desperate need of that again. And if you look, we can go back to that letter of 51 former U.S. intel agencies, right, who meddled in that election. That's what they did. They meddled in the election. They got Tony Blinken reached out to them and said, boy, we got a problem here. Can we say this is Russian disinformation? And they did. And these guys knew this wasn't, they knew by then, or at least most of them did, that laptop was authentic. Mm-hmm. That laptop had been with the FBI for a long time. And yet they went and got the media to spin this yarn that this was all the Russians that were behind this. And think how dangerous that is. We're blaming a nuclear power for something that they weren't behind that. And these people knew that, but it was 2-3 weeks before an election, and they were going to try to give cover. And to me, it's a massive scandal.
Yeah. Yeah. The next 4 years are going to be, they're not going to be boring. No matter what, no matter which side you're on. And I think it says a lot to, this idea of so many people are, always about, speaking truth to power and holding the powerful accountable and taking away the power from the oligarchs and all that. And it's like, well, I can't think of a better way to go about that than to, opening up the people who have the power to scrutiny at the very least,
Couldn't agree more. Yeah. And it is going to be a very exciting 4 years. Now, I will say, I don't think we're going to see a repeat of what it was from 2016 to 2020.
No,
I think a lot of the bureaucratic state has sort of learned something from this, that they can't defeat the president this way, and they probably won't try again. But we're already seeing that the administration, I think, is taking it quite seriously, their responsibility to do what they're elected to do, and to cut government, right? And DOGE is going to try to make massive cuts, and we're seeing it. They already signed the executive order getting rid of DEI. I think that is the canary in the coal mine. We're going to see aggressive action to try to rein in the bureaucratic state, and they will respond. They're not going to take that quietly. There's going to be a lot of everything from lawsuits to leaking stories to friendly media to try to kind of monkey up the works, and it'll be, we can't even predict what the next 4 years is going to look like.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I want to bring a quote from Jacques Barzun that you brought to light, and I'm going to link to this too. So again, if you guys aren't following Jon, definitely follow the Take over on Substack. And there was this one quote you have from the second quote from him that you put out. It's from Dawn to Decadence, and the quote is, "Finding oneself is a misnomer. A self is not found but made." And it's like, man, that's such a. It's amazing how, like, I think a whole career could come down to that line. Like that guy. He was he lived 100 years. It's like he could have just had that one line and be done. I think.
I think I was probably 17 years old when I read that, and it jumped out of all the quotes, in that list. That was the one that really, as a young man, I'm like, oh, he's right. We hear it all the time. I want to find myself. I want to find myself. I want to find myself. And that kind of thinking, he's saying, no, that's wrong. You go and you make yourself. That's ultimately what, how you're going to achieve, what you do in your life. And it's such a simple thing. But we see, modern, humans are constantly searching, like, who am I? What do I want? Go make yourself. And that's just great advice to me.
Yeah, 100%. I've been I've been listening to a lot of music that I used to listen to as a kid. It's sort of been popping up on like YouTube playlists and Spotify and stuff. And my boys are very young, and they really like rock music, the kind that I listen to, like, you know, grunge and Faith No More and the Chili Peppers and stuff. So now with the mix, like on Spotify, I'll have like all these songs from like Alice in Chains and stuff come on that, you know, I was listening to when I was like 10 or 12 years old. And, you know, it's just naturally the way the memory works and the mind works. It's sort of like, oh, who was that little boy there? And, you know, now I'm a, you know, grown ass man looking back on, you know, who that kid was. And it really is, this does resonate, you know, with me a lot. It's like, yeah, not finding yourself, but making yourself, you know, the way that like my own career has gone. I'm sure, you know, your career, you know, if we waited around to, you know, find ourselves, you know, behind a, you know, under a tree, or, you know, or even in a burning bush, if we waited to be prophets, you know, be waiting a really long time for to get anything done.
It's about action, right? Sitting around and waiting for something to come to you, that's not going to get you very far. Your point about music, you know, really for me is a great one. I love sharing music with my kids and movies, and I think they get a little sick of it. You know, and kids today are kids like I love it when my son hears one and he's like, "Oh, Dad, that's a great song," but oftentimes they want to hear what's new and trendy too. And they don't want to watch my movies. They're like, "Dad, this movie's 30 years old, or this movie's 40 years old." And then they watch it and they love it. And I one article on my Substack, like my 7-year-old, I think he was 7, and we put on First Blood, and the kid was just enamored with it. He loved it. And I wrote a whole article, but his first question to me is like, "Dad, why are the cops bad?" And for him, this is like, whoa, the cops are the good guys. Why are they bad here? And I said, you know, cops are like anyone else. There's really good ones, and then you have, you know, some of them are bad people. That's how life is. And but sharing art and movies and music with your kids is one of the best parts of being a dad.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up First Blood. Number one, because when I was a kid, I went through a period of time where I told people, "Don't call me Louis, call me Rambo." Like that was maybe you call me Rambo, to a point where there was like an old elderly woman who, after my, you know, later on in life, when we had like moved out of our neighborhood and my mom would go back and visit, like she was still asking like, "How's Rambo?" But then also, like, as a dad, I'm thinking about First Blood. There's a lot of fucking death, and I'm like, man, how I was definitely probably too young to be watching that. And also, like, man, I'm a lot more protective of my kids than my parents were, you know, of us growing up.
You know, it's funny. Like at least for me, I parent kind of like I was parented in a lot of ways. In our house, you could watch our movies as long as there wasn't nudity. If there was some violence, that was okay. You know, nudity was like the one that was like, no, we can't go there, but a little violence is fine. And, you know, like to me, it was, you know, my son was like 7, 8 years old, and he just, you know, but partly he loves Sylvester Stallone. Rocky was his first hero. Oh, wow. And we have videos when he's 2 years old and he's doing shadow boxing in the mirror, you know, and saying, you know, "Come on, Rocky Balboa," you know, like doing like he was doing his Clubber Lang. And you know, Sylvester Stallone was like his first hero, and so I think that Rambo kind of just was a natural segue.
Yeah, well, something about watching like old movies too. You know, you said like, you know, this movie's like 30 years old. A lot of them still hold up, and they're really great movies. Like over Christmas, we were watching Home Alone, and I hadn't watched Home Alone in probably over 20 years. And I'm watching it, I'm like, this is an excellent movie.
We watch it every year at least twice.
Yeah.
Every year at least twice. John Hughes was a master.
Unreal.
And if you look, like his movies alone in the 80s, like you can, you know, Ferris Bueller's Day Off and The Great Outdoors and Weird Science and The Breakfast Club, and you can just go on and on. Yeah. Like he was behind so many of the best 80s movies. One guy.
Yeah, one guy. And the other one that hit me is Hook with Robin Williams and Dustin Hoffman. I hated that movie when I was a kid.
When I was a kid, it didn't seem it was not what I was expecting.
Yeah.
And I remember not liking it, but it you know, we'll watch that one every now and again. Pretty good movie.
Yeah, it's a movie for parents. Like, the whole, growing up and having to face your childhood again and mortality and all that. And it's brilliant. It's so well done.
It's
So
another book I have in me that I'm going to write someday. And I got a lot of material to work with because I've, written dozens and dozens of articles. But there's this myth, and I'm going to say a myth that Hollywood is so left wing, right? And a lot of the actors in Hollywood might be, but if you look at the movies that were made over these years, like they're very liberty focused and they have very good values. And I think people should be thankful for Hollywood over the years that they've really given us such good art, and I think through that is where we find a lot of meaning. Do I think religion? I'm a Christian guy. Religion is important to me, but art does. The stories we tell are what kind of for so many people, this is where we get our heroes. This is where we know what to do in a situation where we have to be brave, even though when you're afraid. And Hollywood has done a really good job over the years.
Well, speaking of Christianity, I mean, it just so happens that, whether you're a believer or not, I mean, the story itself is incredible. It's a wonderful, wonderful story. I'm going to actually make a request of something that I'd like you to work on. So it's on the issue, on the subject of wrestling, right? Capitalism, socialism, communism, right? Because I think wrestling might be one of those, one of those topics where the socialist states did really well. I mean, when you talk about like the USSR and, and like, Cuban wrestlers and stuff like that.
Iran is another one. Iran is one of the best countries in the world for wrestling.
Yeah.
Very
and it's like
country.
And obviously we got a lot of Americans get golds too. We pop in there. It's like, yeah, you can get gold and have freedom as well. But it might be like an interesting subject, to see, what is it about, those countries that where they were able to sort of lead the way when it comes to grappling. I know with there's been like some really good documentaries on the Red Army in hockey, and so many of those guys wanted to get out of there. It's like, yeah, they had the best guys in, all of the Soviet Union playing, and they couldn't leave, so,
there's a story there somewhere. Yeah. It's something I've never thought about, but yeah, a lot of countries that are very bad countries, as far as, classical liberalism, what we think of, pro-democratic, they had some great wrestlers.
Yeah. Well, I really enjoyed talking with this great wrestler.
Hey, the pleasure was mine. It was a lot of fun talking about things that I don't talk about that much.
Right on. Well, everybody, like I said, I've been a fan of Jon's for a while now. I highly recommend you check out all of his stuff. I'll be seeing you around.
Hey, Lou, it was great to meet you, and appreciate the invitation. It was a lot of fun.